not to go too far into it, but music for me started pretty early in terms of just my love for it. The record collection that I grew up listening to was pretty vast in its diversity. So I was exposed pretty early on to just a lot of different types of music. It would grow beyond that as I got older and meeting more people and hearing their influences and what they were listening to. The first time I touched anything musically, I would say it was probably drums. Drums are pretty easy to get your hands on, even if it's just a little cheap, little drum machine or a little drum set or something like that. But as soon as I figured out how much I loved it, I started asking my parents for everything. The first instrument I learned to play was trumpet. And I played trumpet for about 4 years. And being that my father was in the military, we moved to Germany. And they didn't have my paperwork when I got to Germany. So they asked me, like, what do you play? And I was like, I play drums, because they didn't know the difference. So I played drums for probably a good month before they got my paperwork. And they were like, well, it says here that you played trumpet, but it was great for me, to be able to dabble in that for a little bit. And he gave me the choice. Honestly, the teacher was great about it. He was like, well, listen, obviously, you seem to do well at drums. It says here that you were a great trumpet player. And I did go back to trumpet for a little bit until he allowed me to move back to drums. But that kind of in a nutshell has kind of been my curiosity level with music as a whole. Moving forward from that, my grandfather gave me his old guitar. And so I would pick around the guitar for a little bit. Any instrument that I could get my hand on, and as soon as I was able to start putting those ideas together and making full musical ideas, that's when everything kind of really took off. And probably around the age of maybe 16, 17 years old did that start. And I didn't really get my first sampler until I was maybe 20, 21, or something like that. And I felt like I hit the ground running because even before I got it, I had so many ideas of things that I wanted to try, growing up with all these records and all these ideas and things that I was like, oh, okay, yeah, such as Pete Rock sampled this record, but he didn't sample this song off the same record. I wonder what this would be like, so using all of that and kind of just being able to kind of have this wish fulfillment when I did finally get my hands on equipment is what kind of pushed things forward. But I think over the years, as I've continued to work in equipment and it's changed from, I used an ASRX, which was my first kind of major piece of equipment. I've dabbled with MPCs for a little bit. And then obviously moved into computer-based software and other DAWs. Pro Tools being my first. I've worked in Logic. I've worked in Reason. I worked in Studio One for a long time before inevitably getting into Ableton. And for me, it's always just been about what equipment or what DAW is going to allow me to create the way that I want to create, and have a comfortable environment for me to be able to get the ideas that I hear in my brain out in the most effective manner. So I've used a lot of equipment over the years. I think the advantage that I got that I saw in Ableton immediately. Well, let me not lie to you, because when I first got Ableton, which I got it through a really good friend of mine, who had literally had the company send me one, and when I got it, I'm a person that's really set in my ways. Once I get comfortable with one workflow, I'm like, okay, I'm good. This is the way I'm going to work from now on. And so when I got it, I sat there and I looked at it in the box and I was like, yeah, it looks really cool, but I don't feel like learning anything new. And I remember, I was getting ready to do this set with a good friend of mine, talented brother 14KT. And they wanted us to do this set together. And he kind of had the idea. He's like, wow. He's like, how about if I use my machine? Because he had just started using his machine. And I had just got this Ableton push. And he was like, this would be a good exercise, not only for us to learn this equipment and utilize it, for the first time, but it'll be interesting too. I don't think anybody's really ever done this like this before. And so I kind of threw myself head into it. And one of the things I noticed right off the bat, obviously, that it has more pads than every other machine, but it's really customizable. Ableton in general as software allows you to work, in a really personalized manner. Pretty much everyone I run into, even Jeff, the great Jazzy Jeff, who showed me Ableton, he uses it different than I use it. I use it different than other guys that I know use it. And so there's some similarities, but little nuanced things are different. So yeah, the pad thing was a big thing for me, having more pads. And it was one of the things that really opened up, the finger drumming aspect, because I finger drummed on, 16 pads on Akai and PD pads and stuff like that before. And which is actually the reason that Jeff had them send me the push, because one of the first times I showed up to his house, I played drums on the MPD pad. And he was like, "Oh, you play drums on pads like a drummer." He's like, "You need a push." And I was like, No, I'm good. But one of the first things I noticed coming out of the box was not only the adjustability of, the velocity settings and all of that, but the fact that I had the room all of a sudden to say, okay, I can kind of really set up a really comfortable, customizable setup to where, since I got more than 16 options, I can kind of put things in other places that I wasn't able to before. Being locked to those 16 pads, even though I got really used to it, it did eventually limit me to saying, okay, yeah, I can only put pads in a certain place because of the way that I play. But yeah, so having more pads was one thing. The flexibility of the drum racks in Ableton is really great. And even in the sense that you're able to incorporate other things. Addictive drums is something that I use a lot, which is where you hear the most realistic drum sounds and stuff like that. And even being able to customize the stuff inside of addictive drums. So just, the customization of Ableton, I think in general, is the thing that really helped push things forward for me.